I already started it.
Oh, good deal. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, well, thank you, Jared and Jason and the Conservation Partnership team. Josh, it's good to see you, and Shannon, always appreciate your leadership. Good morning. My name is Julia Wickard, and I have the opportunity to serve as the State Executive Director with the Farm Service Agency. And just wanted to say really thank you. Thank you for everyone coming together. We do it well in Indiana, and we do it well because we really don't care who gets the credit. And that's a great thing. It's a great trait that I think our state has. And when you talk to folks from all across the country, what we have in Indiana with our relationship between FSA and NRCS, but then also with our State Department of Agriculture, our Department of Natural Resources, our soil and water conservation districts, is very unique. And I know, just like family, sometimes it's tough to get along, but we have to figure out how to navigate it and really appreciate the work that you all do at the local level. Obviously, today's call is talking about kind of that joint guidance, if you will, as it relates to status reviews for CRP and how our producers and landowners and stakeholders really count on us to speak with one voice whenever we can. And so that's really the purpose of bringing everybody together in one call. We received a lot of great feedback from the joint trainings that we did. And so feel very strongly that whenever we can jointly communicate information that cross-sects all of our agency work as it relates to conservation, that we should do that. So again, the partnership at the local level is critical, and just appreciate that, as I travel the state and, say hello and sit down and meet with our FSA team, I try to make sure and say hello and thank you personally to you in the county offices and our field offices that really go the extra mile as public servants to do the work for Indiana agriculture and Indiana conservation. So Jared, thanks for letting me have a few moments just to say that. We try to bring us together when it's appropriate, and it seemed like this was an appropriate time for us all to be on the same call at the same time, to record it so it's available for everyone else, and really look forward to determining kind of and figuring out next steps down the road. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. It looks like there's a hand up, actually. I don't know if it's for me or for someone else. And now I can't get to the hand.
Go ahead, Brett. Unmute your mic if you would. Brad Rody, do you have a question?
Well, I've done that before too, so So if you do have a question, I'll be on the call. But really thank Jason and Jared and Shannon and the entire conservation leadership team for our Indiana Conservation Partnership, who step up every time to do the great work of our organization. So I'll be on the call the entire time, and I'll kick it back to you, Jared or Shannon. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Julia. Thank you, Jared. We'll go ahead and get started here with the material. I want to welcome everybody, and I really want to thank at least have an opportunity to share it with you virtually and have a chance to ask questions. I'm going to be doing most of the speaking today, but that doesn't mean I know the most. It's just I was the designated speaker. Again, with me, we have our outstanding team of FSA experts and my staff and others who are prepared to answer the tough questions. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Give me a minute to get this up. So as I'm getting my screen shared, do know that we do know that this information would have been great to have to you months ago, but as most things happen, the best laid plans get reality based with them, don't they? So hopefully this will be better than nothing for you in due time, so we can get this workload completed for you all. I am in the state office, and the connection isn't as good as if I was at home, but hey, we'll go forward. So today's topic, we're going to talk about CRP status reviews joint guidance. We did issue this as a joint guidance document from state offices of FSA, INNRCS, and Indiana Department of Natural Resources Division of Forestry. So throughout this color-filled reiteration of that joint guidance, try to highlight the parts that apply primarily to FSA is in yellow, INNRCS in blue, DNR as in green, pink or other grays as it applies to everybody. So just going to step through this guidance. The good thing is, if you've done this in the past, we will be preaching to the choir. This is not a new sheet of music. It's just a different tempo. For those of you who are new, this may be a lot of information overload. Please reach out to your local experts, your local support staff at the area offices of INNRCS and the state office, as well as your CRP experts out there in the field and the state office at FSA. We'll get you more details as we need. First and foremost, we can't distribute this to everyone that we know might need it. So we send it out to our key district or all INNRCS employees, all FSA employees. Please, 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 as Julia mentioned, share this information with your local partners who are also assisting with CRP or who are interested in CRP. So we all have a similar footing and all have the same information. And that's the value of these joint memorandums. We can put it down in writing. We can all read it the same way. If there's still something that's not clear, you can have that conversation locally. If you can't come to a resolution, now you float it on up, and we help you decide things consistently and move it forward. So the big thing, just as in previous years, our deadline for completing all these status reviews is December 31 of 2023. Doesn't matter if you're dealing with forestry practices or non-forestry practices. We've settled on the same deadline statewide for getting these status reviews completed and the proper documentation forwarded over to the FSA County Executive Directors. So again, just I want to make it very clear. There are really two separate processes for INNRCS and DNR, the Division of Forestry. FSA, you all kind of have a similar process, but INNRCS, we're going to be taking care of the non-forestry practices. DNR Division of Forestry is going to be taking care of the forestry practices, and you can see that we have them listed there. These are the practices as they're listed in the national agreements. I'll come and go into that in a little more detail. We also did share this information as carbon copies to a lot of our conservation partner leaders. As Julie said, thank you very much for being engaged with us. Again, please forward these joint memorandums out to your local staff, again, so that we have that same consistent message and all the other great stuff. So if you haven't done that, partner leaders, please do so we make sure we get it out there, as well as our local USDA employees. Share it with your local partners as well. Make sure we all get the same information. So again, this joint memorandum, it's a doozy. We've got 11 attachments. That's a lot. But we think that we've done a pretty thorough job, that if you are new to this work and or if you are experienced. Not to say that there aren't some oversights, and we'll kind of cover some of those here later on. Nobody's perfect, but we'll highlight some of those. But most of your questions should be embedded within one of these documents here if you follow it to a T. And of course, we do want local flexibility. A lot of you have been doing this for a long time. You have a great relationship, a great working relationship with your clients and with each other. We don't want to mess that up. But if in fact we get to a stopping point, hopefully one of these documents will be the one to lead you to the promised land. So we're going to step through these. First of all, we're going to kind of keep on with the memo and just kind of the background of what we're doing here. Just again, I want to make sure everyone's on the same page of why INNRCS is doing part of this work, why DNR is doing the other part of the work, and where FSA fits. Which is really important to know that at the national level, there are national memoranda of agreements. These are in to CRP, our CRP guidance document, our policy document. Exhibit 19. So if you are interested in reading what's in these, fill out your handbook electronically or in person or in hard copy and pull them out and read them. But there's two separate memorandums of agreements, one between the Farm Service Agency and the U.S. Forest Service, and those cover the CRP tree practices. And of course, there is a financial transaction between the National FSA and U.S. Forest Service. U.S. Forest Service then gives some of that financial assistance down to the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Division of Forestry. So in other words, our forestry partners are getting paid to help with CRP, and that's a great thing. Likewise, there's a national MOA between Farm Service Agency and NRCS, and likewise, National FSA provides financial dollars to National NRCS. National NRCS gives that to Indiana, and that helps pay our salaries to implement CRP. So again, I just want to remind ourselves that as the technical arm of CRP, whether you're NRCS or Division of Forestry, your salary is paid in part to do this work. This is not voluntary work. We are adequately reimbursed to do this. So in a way, we are a technical service provider to Farm Service Agency, and therefore we need to take that our job seriously and do a high quality job. Now, as we know, money is only as good as we have people to get in hours to get the work done, right? Money does not buy time. And so, of course, we do enter into other agreements with our partners, financial agreements with our partners to help us with this work. So as stated there, note 1, we may use other qualified partners to help us with this work. However, when at the end of the day, the NRCS employee and or the Division of Forestry employee is the one responsible for that work. So no matter who we bring on with the Soil and Water Conservation District, a Business Forever Farm Bill biologist, DNR Division of Fish and Wildlife, the buck stops with the NRCS DC or the district forester. Okay, I just want to make sure that's very clear. I'm going to pause there to see if there's any questions on that concept and how important this is. And Jared or Jason, I can't see the chat, so if someone put something in chat, please stop me. Otherwise, we'll move on. This is nothing new. You've heard this many times over the years, but I want to make sure it's clear how important this is in our roles. Okay, we'll move on.
There is one thing in the chat, Shannon, that's more of just a comment than anything, but the highlighting on the memo main page seems to be a little off. It showed NRCS as blue, but highlighted the DC in green. It was just a comment.
Oh,
so
well,
we'll notate that, and yep.
All right, this is just for presentation. Try to do my best. All right, moving on. So we have really two sets of status reviews. One of them we call the maintenance status reviews, and these are the ones where we're looking at the CRP contract in the later years of the contract. So I'll focus on that one first. So this is very important. I think this is something that has been caused some confusion in the past. I'm going to spend some time on this. NRCS is the only agency performing maintenance status reviews. And I'm going to pause for effect there. What does that mean? That means the Division of Forestry is not performing maintenance status reviews. Okay, so who is doing that? The answer is nobody. Again, going back to those national memorandums of agreement, the one between FSA nationally and U.S. Forest Service does not include looking at contracts in the last several years of the contract. Okay, but the NRCS MOU does have NRCS looking at these contracts in the last several years. Okay, so I just want to make that very clear. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay, so this year, and again, with this is one major change. This year, we are looking at contracts that are set to expire in 2025 only. If you remember last year, we actually did 2 years worth of maintenance status reviews, those that expired in 2023, this coming September, as well as 2024. And if you remember why we did that is we wanted to get caught up to get us 2 years ahead. That way, if we find any major compliance issues, farmers have adequate time, adequate growing seasons, adequate construction seasons to get that work completed. The way we were doing this when we originally started back in 2020 is farmers had less than a year to get that work done. So we finally got caught up last year. Great job to the field and our partners for helping us do that. This year and in the future years, we're going to be on track to looking at these 2 years before they expire. And we think that's going to do us a lot of good across the state. The other new thing this year is this will be the first year that we actually have Clear 30 practices that we will be evaluating. Okay. Clear 30 came to us several years ago. We are now seeing contracts in that first iteration of status reviews on our 3-year basis. So I'm not going to get into the weeds on that one. Additional guidance will be coming on Clear 30, but there will be a separation between traditional maintenance status reviews and establishment status reviews and Clear 30. Okay. So let's move on to establishment status reviews. And again, this one, both NRCS and Division of Forestry will be performing these status reviews. These are the ones that are pretty much, after planting, after construction, we're in the establishment phase, but now we're looking to issue that final status review. And so what we're doing in Indiana is looking at these in the 3rd growing season. So in other words, this year we will be looking at contracts that started in 2020 because they would have had growing season 2021, 2022, and our current growing season 2023. That's where we'll be looking at those. Okay. We'll stop there to see if there's any questions on the difference between maintenance and establishment status reviews.
There's nothing in the chat.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. We did also provide you all with this joint memorandum. Three of those 11 attachments are actually lists of contracts and common land units, practices that will need a status review completed this year. Okay. So there's three separate lists. And on the establishment status reviews, we have one that has the NRCS practices, and that's called the 2023 Indiana CRP status reviews list, establishment, NRCS, kind of hopefully a very descriptive file name. And then we have the same one for the Division of Forestry. So again, I'm just going to have to reiterate, NRCS folks, you have access to the list that your district foresters will be performing status reviews on for FSA, but you don't need to worry about it, right? District foresters, you have the list of practices that NRCS will be performing status reviews on and delivering to FSA for your information, but you don't need to worry about it either, okay? So I think we're very open and clear, but we do have separate duties and responsibilities. If we all do our job, we should be able to get this job done efficiently. The third attachment there is the maintenance status reviews. And again, you'll see that we do not have one for the Division of Forestry because they are not doing maintenance status reviews. So again, managing 3 separate spreadsheets will hopefully be easier than having everything in one. But if we'll see how this year goes, and we'll adapt for next year if you all have it all in one and manage it that way. But we've at least given you those lists. So we'll walk through what those lists contain. This is a copy of the NRCS list. And of course, we started with Adams County because you all are the first county in the state alphabetically. But you can see there's a lot of good information in these spreadsheets if you like data. The various attributes of the county. Really important and we're going to stress this, it's going to be very important to have good, solid communication between us as the technical agencies and FSA. The contract number, we likely don't have access to what that means. FSA does. Farm number, tract number, CLU number. NRCS, we have access to that information. Division of Forestry does not. So again, you'll see that there is PII, personal identifying information in this. So again, we don't want to share this out broadly. However, we don't know farmer name. We don't know farmer location. Well, I'll share that with you a little bit. But anyways, it's going to take good communication to make sure we get the information needed so that we can perform our technical responsibilities. But moving across, you can see the sign-up number, sign-up name. You can't read it on this screen, but you can maximize it in Excel. Start date, end date, contract acreage, and then whether the acres are re-enrolled or not. And I pointed out that if you look here on this list here, the first 10 or so of Adams County are re-enrolled offers, or they were re-enrolled. They were re-enrolled back at the original start date of 2020. Okay, so that was a re-enroll. So these are 13-year-old contracts, right? Move down to the last two. You can see that the re-enrolled acres are 0. That indicates that these were new enrolls back in 2020. So those were cropland prior to enrolling in 2020, right? Then you have the practice acreage. You can see the practice code, CP21, CP33, 43, the practice acreage. And then this is on your spreadsheet. It'll continue on to the right, but I just cut it off and put it on here for one screen. We also kind of simplify the beginning year and the end year, rather than having to navigate the month and day. We just give you the end year, sign up type, continuous, general, so on and so forth. And then we kind of give a little more information as far as who has the technical responsibility for that practice, as well as kind of the skill type that might be needed for the inventory and evaluation, certification of the practice, maintenance of the practice, and management type. Again, agronomy, CP21s, filter strips, that would take more of an agronomic type expertise. You get down to the wildlife practices of CP33 and 43. That's where we need our wildlife expertise to adequately do that job. Okay. And then moving on across, if it's wildlife, or we have Pheasants Forever and INNRCS Division of Fish and Wildlife over on the right. That kind of helps give a rough idea of who could be available to help with that if it's a wildlife practice. Again, Pheasants Forever, Farm Bill biologists kind of have certain counties they prioritize. Division of Fish and Wildlife have other counties they prioritize. That's just to help you kind of navigate that. Okay. We'll move on here. Right now, all of the practices are sorted by physical county. Okay, so again, if it's in Adams County, physically it will be in the sort by Adams County in that data set. However, we know that there are farms that may reside in one county, but they administer their records in another county with FSA. Okay, if and when that happens, and here's some of the agreement that we had the state office leadership of DNR, FSA, and NRCS. If it's a forestry practice, and if in the physical county, the district forester in the physical county will coordinate with FSA in the administrative county to get that information done and deliver the products. Okay, now Division of Forestry, you all have different geographic representation areas. We understand that they may not fit well within NRCS's administrative areas or FSA's, so it's going to take some good communication to make sure that we get the right people doing the right work and meeting the deadlines. For NRCS, if you're in a physical county, you'll coordinate with the DC and the administrative county to obtain that information. And again, we know this is difficult because you as local people in your counties likely have a great relationship with your county counterparts at FSA. You may not know your FSA counterparts in the neighboring counties. So we're trying to simplify that by having, the administrative FSA works with their local DC who they know, and then the DCs work with each other. So hopefully that makes sense. You can read it, digest it as you come across these, and we'll see how we get. Now we know too that there are farms that are located in Indiana, but administered in, say, Ohio. Likewise, we know that there are farms in Ohio that might be administered by FSA in Indiana. Okay, pretty much what we're saying on those is those practices are not included in your lists. But if you get a call from, let's say, Ohio FSA saying, hey, where's my status review? We have additional guidance we've issued that we pull on that. If that happens, again, work through that guidance that we issued in the past, or reach out to the state office. We'll figure the best way of getting that information communicated across state lines. Okay, I'll pause there real quick, see if there's any questions on that. All right, here's just an example. Allen County, again, this is not all of Allen County's status reviews they'll be completing, but it just shows you where all these are Allen County, physical county, but Tim Baum is going to have to work through across state line or across county lines with Adams County, DeKalb County, Wells County, Whitley County. So Tim, you're going to be working with Brian and Derek and Sarah and Jeremy and coordinating that with their local FSA offices to make sure we get that information and get those status reviews completed. And again, of course, we rely on partners. We'll have to make sure we get that information to them as well. So that's just how you can read those data in that spreadsheet. Okay, also in that spreadsheet is another tab that kind of gives a summary of your workload for establishment status review. So again, this is a snapshot of one of those tabs in that spreadsheet. Kind of summarizes how many establishment status reviews you have on the list to complete this year. We also then broke it down by the number of those practices that are more in that agronomic expertise, as well as the wildlife expertise. So again, you kind of get a good feel for the workload and who you might need to work with on partners to help you address it if needed. You'll notice engineers and NRCS forestry, we have 0. And again, that's because we don't necessarily need an engineer to do a final status review on a grass waterway. You know, the engineer has already gone out and done the as-builts for the practice certification, right? So the construction was done properly, the erosion control blanket was down, seeding was done properly, all that good stuff. We made the payment. Now we're coming in to make sure the grass is growing, to put it simple. We don't need an engineer to see if the grass is growing, right? Likewise, NRCS forestry, there is one. That is living snow fences. So living snow fences is a forestry practice. I'd have to argue with that. It is. However, it's not listed in the national MOA, and so that falls under NRCS responsibility. Good or bad, we don't have any up for status review this year, so that's why that's 0. Move on to another tab. Okay, so that was the establishment data. It's very similar data for maintenance. Here's the maintenance workload. Again, these are the ones that are set to expire in 2025. The establishments were the ones that started in 2020, and you can see the workload there. So you add the two together, and you're looking at a lot of site visits, right? Also, in each of those tabs, the establishment and the maintenance tab is expected workload. So again, we kind of summarize a lot of the data that we have behind the scenes. So you can see here, starting on the left-hand side, we have 2023 maintenance. Again, we already covered that. The establishment, you can see the numbers there. And then we kind of break that down further into new establishments or re-enrolls and or clear 30. Okay, so again, if you're wondering if you have any clear 30s on your docket, you can see where those might be. If you're looking at newly planted or 3-year-old plantings, I'm going to call them. Those are the new enrolls. The 13 plus contracts are the re-enrolls. So you can kind of see how that breaks down. Moving across the middle of the spreadsheet, you can see the expected number of practice certifications you might be expected to do this year. Again, these would be those contracts that started in 2022. So likely they will have been planting the grass, completing their construction, either past fall, winter, or through spring. Again, this is the workload, just kind of estimate where you may be going out and doing a practice certification. And then moving on to the right, we did take a stab at estimating expected new offers and or re-enrolled offers for continuous sign up as well as general sign up. And you can see kind of where those numbers play out. These are all estimates based on prior year enrollment. So again, if we expect sign up 59 to look much like sign up 57, this is what you can expect to see, so on and so forth for general sign up 60 compared to 58. Going to kind of keep going through here the various data that's out there. There's also in each of these spreadsheets a completed workload. So again, this shows you what you actually completed in 2022. So if you're wondering, holy cow, how am I going to get 5,000 status reviews done this year? Lo and behold, you did that many last year. So that's what we kind of want to show you, what was actually accomplished through last year's work, from status reviews to practice certifications to CRP planning. Okay. And then finally, if you're interested in the history of CRP here in Indiana, we summarize what we call the sign-up summaries. And this kind of gives you a breakdown by sign-up number, sign-up 58 all the way down to sign-up 32. What was the fiscal year? What was the type of enrollment? Was it general, continuous, grasslands? How many contracts did we get through that sign-up? How many new practices did we add? How many re-enroll practices did we add? And then which practices were they? All across the board, CP1 all the way to CP43, okay? And then down below, you can see that this is by practice number. So all these are practice numbers by sign up. So again, if you're interested in history or where we are currently in Indiana, I think it's pretty cool to see what we've done over the time of history. These are current contracts. So these are contracts that are still active. We don't have the past date of what we did back in 1990. These are what's currently an active contract. And then we also down below, we sum up the same information by acres. So the top data are by practice number, the bottom are by acres. I didn't have to give you that exact screenshot of all that data, but it's in there in your spreadsheets. And then finally, in that spreadsheet, if you keep scrolling to the right, you'll see these same numbers broken down by the various, I'll call them sign up types. We have clear 30, we have continuous, CRP, farm wetland pilot, general sign up, grasslands, highly erodible land, and safe. So you can kind of see where the different practice types and contracts and practices and acres kind of divvy out by by the various sign up type. So I'll pause there real quick to see if there's any questions on what's in each spreadsheet.
Shannon, we do have a few things in the chat that I'll read to you. The first one, Clear 30 practices have a maintenance status review every 3 years. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that's why we will give you additional guidance on those later.
And then the next one, for general sign-up, CP2 requirements are very minimal, but participants are able to add more grasses and forbs in order to receive more points. For the maintenance status reviews, do we hold them accountable for the minimum requirement in the job sheet or the grasses and forbs that added to receive more points during the general offer?
That's a good question. We'll get to that later. But again, if it is contractually required to maintain a specific amount of diversity, then that's what they will be held to.
Yeah. Okay. I concur with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Irate. I should have had you answer that question, but we're on the same page. Good. All right. Keep those questions coming, everybody. It really does help. You know me, I like to talk, but I need a breath here and there. So good questions all questions are very welcome. Thank you so much for that. What I covered was INNRCS spreadsheets. I'm going to hit real briefly the Division of Forestry spreadsheet. Very similar, yet this is only focuses on the forestry practices. So again, everyone has access to each other's data if you're interested, but we all have our responsibilities to maintain and manage our workload accordingly. So again, you can see similar data for the forestry practices. Again, there are no maintenance status reviews. I can't stress that enough. I think we've had that miscommunication in the past. There are no maintenance status reviews that Division of Forestry will be provided. They'll only be looking at establishment status reviews. And then you can see across the board, the certifications, all the other good stuff. And then likewise, that sign-up summary that I gave you earlier was only the non-forestry practices. We do have the similar data for the forestry practices, so you can see how those data shake out. All right, let's move on. So what's really important, I can't stress this enough, is communication. Okay, like I mentioned, there's a lot of work to be completed. To get that work completed is going to take good communication, because some of us have access to some data, some of us don't have access to some data. We need to make sure we share and agree accordingly. Okay. All right, so we gave you the list. You have those. What we're telling you right now is those are the only contracts and practices that we need to evaluate for status reviews. Okay. If you have access to additional data that's not in that list or anything else, we're telling you right now, don't worry about it. The data that we gave you is the data that's the workload. Now, if you mutually agree that there are errors in that data set that we gave you, please reach out. I'm talking to the NRCS folks here at the top right now, NRCS in blue. The NRCS and FSA, if you think there are errors in the list that we gave you, please contact Jared and myself. Otherwise, move forward as it is. Okay. The other good thing about our national MOAs is if there was a practice that was re-enrolled in 2020 and it was properly maintained. So in other words, it was a 2010 contract. It got re-enrolled in 2020, and we have good documentation that back in that 2020 re-enrollment conservation planning exercise that we did, that everything was in really good order. We don't need to go back out and look at 13-year-old grass again if we were very confident that grass has been well maintained. Okay, it's on your list, but we're saying if you mutually agree, FSA and NRCS, that this specific practice was in good shape back in 2020 when we looked at it, we do not have to go back and put another eye on it. We do, however, need to issue the status review, the LTP 13, and also provide that O&M monitoring worksheet, which we'll go through here in a little bit, but we do not have to make that site visit. So again, that's going to take good communication to make sure that we have that agreement locally. Okay. And then of course, as I mentioned earlier, DCs, if you have a partner that's going to help you, make sure you communicate that to your partner. We don't need them going out and doing a lot of work for naught, right? They have a lot to do in limited time as well. We need to maximize our efficiencies and make sure we assign that, ask our partners for help only on those that we really need the help on. Moving on down, same concept applies to FSA and the district foresters. again, sit down, review your lists, make sure we have good communication. If you think something's wrong with the lists, now we're going to direct those questions to both Jared Thomas and Brenda Hooter with DNR. And again, same way with the status reviews. If it was a re-enrollment from 2020 and it was in good shape, the site visit can be waived. And again, district foresters, if you pull on any partners to help you with that work, that's great. Please do so. But again, it will funnel back through you, and you will be the responsible one for the quality of that work. Comments or questions on the importance of communication?
There was one that just popped in the chat here, Shannon. Is there a way to tell if a contract was new or re-enrolled in 2020?
Yes. Go back up to your data set. I'll go back to that screenshot. Right here on your spreadsheets, there's a re-enrolled acres column. And if it has a acreage in it, it was re-enrolled in 2020. If it has a 0, then it was a new offer in 2020. So that is one way to tell. Again, that's where it's going to take both FSA and your technical experts at NRCS or Division of Forestry to sit down, go through these lists together, make sure we have a common agreement, understanding before we go out and do a whole lot of work that may not be necessary. Good question. Good question. And then, of course, we also summarize those in some of these other summary spreadsheets. If you want to get a good handle on what that looks like as far as numbers, a lot of these are re-enrollments. That these are 13-year-old practices or others. So make sure you take a look at those data before you go out and just drive around the countryside looking at 13-year-old grass or trees, unless you need to. Again, that's why I say we can't make that decision here at the state office and give you a blank slate. You all locally might know your clients, you know the conditions of the site conditions, the weather patterns. You may know whether you need to go out and look at them or not. If you need to look at them, go look at them. If you agree locally you don't, then you can forego that site visit. All right, we'll move on and finish up the memo here. As we mentioned, the NRCS or Division of Forestry will deliver the completed status reviews to the FSA CED by December 31st, 2023. And again, I'm going to say we keep saying the CED only because, and we said the DC, because again, you are the local leaders within your counties. We know you have staff, you know you have support staff and other partners. If you work it out to communicate with a program technician or others, that's perfectly fine. But again, knowing that the leaders of the county are the ones that are responsible for the quality of the work that goes on and make sure everything gets done. Okay. Now, 2A there. We are not at the state office requiring you all to report back that your whole list has been completed. Okay, there's a lot of work. We are confident that the priority work will get done to make sure the CRP is being maintained, being managed accordingly, and a good quality work according to those national memorandums of agreement. We're not going to have that much more oversight from the state office to make sure that you get the work done. Work together, work collaboratively. If things don't appear to be getting done, have those communications, remind everyone of the joint agreements and the national MOUs. We trust that the work will get done. We don't need to have you report back to us nor provide any additional reports back to anything to that effect. Okay. Now, the big thing though, we will find problems. We know that. We have found problems. We know there are problems. When that happens, please, again, communicate. And we'll go through this in a little more detail later on. If NRCS, if you or our partner finds a problem, before we just send a letter out of noncompliance, let's make sure we have a good conversation amongst ourselves within our family, between the CED, the DC, the partner who may have put an eye on it. Let's make sure we have a good conversation about the severity of the problem before we get farmers all riled up about something that may not be as big of a problem as what we thought. Okay. Likewise, have that conversation, find ways to resolve the issue. I'm going to say nicely versus a black and white letter and penalties and that sort of thing. again, have those conversations and make sure we take, if we have to take a non-compliance pathway, let's make sure that it's the right path. Otherwise, let's find other solutions. Now, again, we have to go down that path of non-compliance, and we will, and you have, and that's great. But again, let's make sure we have that local communication before going too far down the path and we end up not on the same page. That's the worst thing we can do for our client, is end up, the NRCS says one thing, FSA says another, or the Division of Forestry says one thing, FSA says another. That's something we don't want to have our clients observe. Make sure we go out with one USDA voice and take issues where we need to take issues.
And Shannon, if I can just echo on that from an FSA standpoint, FSA, we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence, and we're extremely grateful of all the work DNR and INNRCS is doing with these LTP 13 status reviews, establishment reviews. But just making sure we're doing our role on administrating the program of reviewing this documentation that's been given back to us by our partners. And as Shannon mentioned, you know, communication is going to be key. But before contacting a producer or sending out a compliance letter, just to echo, make sure us and INNRCS are on the same page. And if that needs us better clarification of what the LTP 13 stating, you know, generating those conversations with our partners when we receive those back in our county offices. And then there's another question that's popped up in the chat. And I think this has to go back to those previous steps. We made more clarification on it, but it was, what about encroachment potential or trees growing? I'm assuming that's talking about going out and doing those reviews and those first steps.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a little bit. So let's make sure we don't lose sight of that question, Jared.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Shannon.
And thanks for that additional clarification, Jared, and stressing of communication. And again, I would even encourage, you know, before we take issue with a farmer and possibly hit them in their pocketbook, I would suggest that the USDA team and our partners go make another site visit and make sure everyone sees the issue. I mean, photos do a great job, but sometimes seeing is again gets that consistent message. You know, definitely go out together, have these conversations in the field if need be. Talk to the farmer. Maybe there's something that you know, we weren't able to glean in our initial visit, but maybe the farmer has some explanation for why there's a problem. You know, I think that'd be strongly encouraged to do that locally. Again, that takes time. We realize that, but dealing with irate farmers, as any of you can probably tell, who feel they are not wrong, will take up more of your time. Guaranteed. All right, good stuff, good stuff. Let's move on. We will talk now about our process document. Again, one of those lovely 11 attachments, kind of gives a step-by-step of who does what, when, how, and where. Again, we realize flexibility is definitely encouraged at the local level, but this is more of a, if you follow this cookbook approach, things shouldn't get out of order too much, and people make sure we get the right things going on here. All right, so first step, we've already done that. We've given you the list of CRP practices that will be reviewed. You all have that in your possession, so you're ready for step number 2A. Now, 2A, 2B, I just circled these in different colors. Don't worry about the colors, please. I should have even said that. Just to highlight that, again, FSA and INNRCS, you all locally need to talk about your lists affecting your counties. Talk about them, and then also, importantly, decide on what we need to do the job. So INNRCS, you know, you're going to be speaking on behalf of our partners too. You know, let's agree locally that, you know, we might need a copy of the track map, various forms, you know, plat book copies, so we can actually find out how to get to the farm. Agree on that locally. You know, don't be saying FSA wouldn't give it to me, or I don't need it. Just have that conversation and agree locally on what data we need to do the job effectively, as well as our partners need. Similarly, district foresters and FSA do the same thing. Discuss your lists and also discuss what you need. Again, Division of Forestry, you all don't have possibly access to a geo-referenced CLU layer to where you know where it's at. You may need more information than INNRCS because you need to know how to get there. Likewise, the plan maps, the track maps, all the other good stuff to do the job effectively. Okay. Now, this is where I say agree locally. If we have if I say I need a track map and a plan map, and I need the CRP1, the CRP2, and the crop report, no, I don't. Agree locally what I need to find the site, know what I'm supposed to be looking at, know where I'm looking, and how to do the job effectively, right? Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. But again, we strongly encourage that conversation has to happen. Otherwise, this work will never get done accordingly or appropriately. Okay, moving on to step 3. Once we have that information in hand, we go out and do our site evaluations, and then we complete the LTP13 and the status review check sheet. It's really important that if we see issues, take photos. Take site referenced photos, take good quality close-ups and everything else of what you say. If you say, hey, there's erosion, we should be able to see a picture of that. Because again, our partner may be out there doing the field work that then comes to the DC, who then we deliver to FSA. And if especially if it's a non-compliance issue, we want to make sure that we have clear understanding of what the issue is. Because again, we might have 3 people making decisions. We need to make sure we're all on the same page before we make that final decision of compliance or non-compliance. Okay, so photos are going to be really critical. Also, if we do see issues, whether it's tree encroachment, like we mentioned, erosion, what have you, we do need exact measurements of what that means. We can't just say there's trees growing in the southwest corner. So okay, well let's see a picture of the southwest corner, but then let's have an estimate of the extent of the potential non-compliance issue out there. Hopefully that makes sense, and move on. Okay, we'll go over this in a little more detail, but where we don't have efficiency. So again, we think the grass is growing, the trees are growing, got diversity, unapproved species are in check. We are going to collect the primary contact signature on that LTP13 form and make sure they have a copy of that, as well as the O&M monitoring worksheet. Again, this is the primary contact. So again, this is something we might need from FSA, because we may have a lot of different people with shares in the CRP contract. We're just going to deal with the primary contact and make sure that we get that report to that producer. If we have deficiencies, we find potential, and we'll go through these here in a little more detail. If we find a potential deficiency, this is where, again, we're going to have that conversation locally, make sure we all agree that it is a deficiency. Then we'll reference our other guidance that we have. And then again, if we need to notify the farmer about fixing errors or penalties, what have you, to take care of the non-compliance issue, that communication will come from FSA, along with the documentation that we show that the CRP contract is not up to current standards or CRP requirements. Okay. Now, if we have deficiencies, the CRP participant is going to have to take some action. First, they're going to have to respond to FSA's notice that, hey, you have a deficiency, and tell us why. And then if they say, oh, okay, I didn't understand that was a deficiency, I'll fix it up, no problem. We move on, right? So that's kind of what the rest of the process document is about, how to deal with deficiencies here. So again, if the farmer fixes the issue, now us as the technical authorities, we need to go back out and make sure that the fix was done properly. Sometimes we may need to do a site visit. Sometimes we might say, hey, farmer, take a picture of what you did. We're good with that. Again, work that out locally of what that might look like as far as verifying that the work that was done is up to current standards and or CRP requirements. And then we kind of we repeat that step after they make those fixes. So hopefully, again, read through that process document. Hopefully you won't have to do too much of this, but if you do, you've got that in writing on the process to follow. So any questions on the process document?
And Shannon, just to clarify, there is a little conversation going on. Who exactly is collecting the signature on the LTP13 without deficiencies?
Without, that would be the technical responsibility people. So either INNRCS or Division of Forestry. Yeah.
And just to echo on the conversations that's happening in the chat, that's where we're going to go back to communication is key. And in some instances, it does make sense for FSA to obtain those signatures, but just making sure that we're communicating that at a local level. And if you're looking for state guidance, that's where FSA and INNRCS and our other partners are going to go back to this joint guidance and the processing. But that's something that needs to be discussed at a local level. And I would agree at some counties that it would make sense for FSA to obtain those signatures, but discuss that locally.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. And again, I need to repeat what I said. I said it incorrectly. I did not say my thoughts completely. So thank you for clarifying that. We said NRCS or Division of Forestry. You know, again, you are the ones responsible for making sure those clients understand that they're doing a good job. However, if it's more efficient for FSA to collect that signature, like we know that they're coming in to do business at the office, let's work it out locally. And again, make sure we're not running around trying to collect a signature and FSA is running around trying to collect a signature. Let's just have that agreement locally. It's important that the farmer gets a report, how quickly they get it. Again, it's without deficiency, so it's not a big deal, but it is important that they know that they've done a good job. Work it out locally of who gets that report to the farmer, and we'll be in good shape. But again, if there are deficiencies, that communication will need to come from FSA, because that's going to be more of an authoritarian things to do. Good question. Good question. Okay, ready to move on? Okay. So the next one is what we call our instructions document. And again, there's a lot of words on here, but again, if you're new to this, you can follow this, and it should hopefully stepwise you through what we need to do. So why are we out there making site evaluation? What are we looking for? Number one, we're looking to make sure that the practice that we're looking at still meets our field office tech guide standard, as well as the CRP requirements in place at the time of enrollment. Okay, so what does that mean? It kind of comes back to that question we had about the CP2, N1A points, and other additional diversity, so on and so forth. Those things change. As we know, CRP has not been the same since it first came on board in 1985. A lot has changed. Every year, something new might come aboard. So we've got to evaluate these practices as if is how they. And likewise, our field office tech guide standards may change. So we can only gauge the farmer about what was in place at the time they enrolled. Okay. So again, that might take a little bit of additional information about, what was the N1A point mix that the farmer agreed to plant? Did they sign up for a CP12 as well? And all these other things that kind of go into that CRP requirement. Similar with the field office tech guide. If you're not sure what the tech guide was at the time of enrollment, you can either see if you can find it in the archive of field office tech guide, or come up to float that up to the state office, and we'll make sure you get that standard that was in place at the time. And then kind of, if everything's good, it tells you how to fill out the LTP 13, as well as if they're not good, how to fill out the LTP 13. Hopefully that all makes sense, and we just make sure we document that accordingly. And then again, if it's not if it's not sufficient, that opens up a conversation with FSA and everyone else before we actually make that final, because we may change our mind, and after conversation. I've already said this before, but hit down to note number 2 for the establishment status reviews. If we mutually agree between FSA and the technical agency that the practice was re-enrolled in 2020, it was properly maintained, site visit can be waived. Okay, we've already covered that, but kind of reiterate it here. So moving on, we do have a spot in this document about cost share. Again, read it. If there's any questions, float those on up to your higher levels within the agencies, and we'll get you an answer. But typically, if cost share can be approved for various reasons, but otherwise, if it's something that the farmer didn't do adequate maintenance or management on, that kind of cuts the cost share funds out of the equation. Okay. And again, if we decided a decision as a non-compliant decision, that is an adverse determination that becomes very important. That's why we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We have one voice of USDA, but then again, FSA will be that communicator of that non-compliance decision, of that adverse decision. Okay. Comments or questions before I move on? The instructions document. Okay. Also in that instructions document is how to deal with noxious and unapproved species. We'll kind of hit this several times, but this kind of gets into one of those questions about woody encroachment as well. I will point out there is a discrepancy between the documents we sent you, and I'll point that out later. But again, we do have different groups of invasive species that we have to treat differently. Okay, what you're looking at right now are the noxious weeds as identified by Indiana law. We covered this last year because last year Indiana law changed pretty significantly. Okay, they added a lot of species, and you pretty much what it is prior to 2022, everything from Johnson grass on up was the Indiana noxious weed list. In 2022, everything from common water hemp on down is now also considered noxious by Indiana state law. And you'll notice there's a lot of species on here that are kind of common in some of our early plantings, such as the water hemps, the mare's tail, some of the amaranths. That's why we have an asterisk by some of these that says, you know, during establishment, we're going to see these species. And so we're okay with CRP that they exist so long as when they become final establishment, they're pretty much gone. And that's what history shows. You take cropland, you stop farming, you get mare's tail and you get pigweeds and everything else coming up. But once those planted grasses and trees start to outcompete them, they go away, right? So that's good. So we're giving that allowance in our CRP evaluations. Unless, and this is really important, unless there's a local county weed board requires a lower level of control. Then that farmer has to control those water hemps and mare's tails and all those other good stuff, even during establishment. Okay, so it depends on your local county weed boards. Okay, comments or questions on this real quick? So in other words, these species have always been in the CRP contracts as must be controlled. Okay, these are state law. These are biggies. We can't have these on our CRP acres. And you'll notice Canada thistle, Johnson grass. Do we have Canada thistle and Johnson grass on our CRP acres in Indiana? I'm going to facetiously say no, but we know that's not true. So again, it's very important that farmers know they must control these. Okay. And moving on down, then we also have our USDA unapproved species. And again, these are not necessarily regulated by state law, but we know that these are not good for CRP. They could cause problems offsite of CRP. They cannot compete our desired vegetation. These have not changed, except I'll point out the highlighted part here in the tall fescue. This is a change that we put in last year. The CP1 10-point N1A offers only can be tall fescue, but we now have a 0-point option for N1As. And so again, those could be tall fescue as well. And again, control of these is 10% of the CRP acreage. And again, we talked about woody species. That's down here at the last one. Woody species in grass practices are a non-compliance potential, or they are an unapproved species. So if they exist in more than 10%, that could be a non-compliance issue as we move on through the process. Comments or questions? Unapproved species is likely our biggest issue with non-compliance in CRP. I think that's probably where we see the most. It's for a lot of it's due to lack of maintenance. A lot of it's due to because these things want to live where they want to live. But it's probably our biggest issue we see with our status reviews, would be my guess. I think you probably agree with me on that. All right, finally, on the instructions document, if we find out that a practice was incorrectly enrolled, we do need to notify FSA. For example, if we have a filter strip that is not adjacent to an eligible body of water, we need to report that. Someone made a mistake back in the past, but we do need to take issue with that and then take care of that. So these are some common examples that we might find. We need to make sure we document that and give that to FSA. Moving on to the practice criteria document, another one of those 11 attachments. This again, there's a lot of repeat in this document that kind of gives an idea of what you will want to look at when you're out there. For most practices, we're going to make sure that the current acreage still meets the enrolled acres as well as the standards and CRP requirements. For example, if you have a filter strip that's 10 feet wide, well, likely they enrolled at least 20 feet. 20 feet is the minimum for CRP, so we've got a kind of a double whammy there. So we need to make sure we take a look at the acreage and extents of the practice, make sure they match up with everything. Then make sure we have to have adequate vegetation density and species diversity. And again, this kind of gets back to those N1A point values and safe mixes and things like that, pollinator mixes. and making sure that they meet the current our current FOTG standards and CRP requirements in place at the time of enrollment, and also that we don't have any noxious or unauthorized species greater than the tolerable limits that we just talked about. And then finally, no erosion, major sediment accumulations or tile blowholes, things that are going to be detrimental to that practice functioning moving forward. For tree plantings, same thing. Make sure the trees are growing, adequate density, species diversity, so on and so forth. And again, I said there's a lot of repeat in this document, but there are some differences when we get into grass waterways. And we're looking at gullies, active erosion, sediment accumulations, and things that would make that grass waterway not function properly. And then likewise with some of our wetland practices, we need to make sure that we have the proper amount of water depth, as well as hydrology and vegetation, all the other good stuff that we need to look for in a wetland, as well as the buffer. Comments or questions on the practice criteria document? Okay, we'll move on to another attachment. This is the technical requirements. And again, this hasn't changed in the past. It kind of gives you the different requirements for the N1A point values and other good stuff by practice. Again, we did put in a spot in there for that N1A point mix. So making sure that we adequately evaluate that new CRP ability. So moving on, another attachment, CRP status review check sheet. This is kind of what you would use in the field to help you remember what to look for. You're looking at required width, lengths, and acres, diversity, density, unapproved species, so on and so forth. This is kind of a check sheet to document what you see out in the field. And of course, if you see something that's not adequate, we want to make sure we have good photos and exact measurements of that potential issue. Also on that document on page 2 is the list of unapproved species and your ability to document how much of that species you see. I've seen a lot of these check sheets where this part is not filled out. FSA can't make that good decision unless we fill out what we see. If it's greater than 10%, let's say what it is. Is it 11% or is it 99%? Let's make sure we adequately document that. Now I'm going to point out here, you can see the yellow highlight there under Palmer Amaranth. If you caught it in that previous instruction document, we did not have the asterisks by that species. Okay. We do have it in this list, and we also have it in the O&M sheet. We're going to go with what's in this sheet as well as the O&M sheet. So there is a discrepancy. If we decide to fix it up in the instruction sheet, we will. But right now, we're going to go with, if hopefully we don't have Palmer greater than 5%. But right, this is what we sent out, so we're going to stick with it. So hopefully farmers won't have that issue. But if they do, we will work with them to make sure they keep it at least less than 10%. Okay. Another attachment is LTP 13. Again, I'm not going to go into detail, just showing what it looks like. Hopefully you all know about it. If not, pull that up and joint guidance and get familiar with it. And then finally, the big thing, I think this is really taking our CRP quality to the next step, is the operation and maintenance monitoring worksheet we started back in 2020. This is really the first time we actually adequately communicated the client's responsibilities for controlling unapproved species, and controlling all the other good stuff. In the past, we did a good job about telling them they had to control erosion, they had to control noxious weeds, but we didn't adequately communicate, I'm going to have to say, the unapproved species that we like to see. So anyway, this is a document that needs to go with every status review so that farmers have this information in hand. They can read about it. They know the tolerable levels of the various unapproved species. It's right there in front of them. Likewise, if they have issues, we can make it clear that they need to contact the county committee to do these maintenance activities during the primary nesting season if needed. Again, I think which does a really good job of better communicating maintenance requirements for CRP participants. And then finally, again, this is just a sheet that the farmers can use to monitor their CRP acres every year. They don't have to return this to us. It's just a guide for them to follow if they so choose desire, or they choose to do so. So I will pause there. We covered quite a few attachments. See if there are any questions on those.
We have a few in the chat, Shannon. Can an LTP 13 have multiple fields combined on a single form if the status is the same?
That's a good question. And yes, you can. You know, that list that you have is by each practice on that contract or on that track, right? But if it's more efficient to combine them, have at it.
And then I don't know if now would be a time to circle back around to when INNRCS, FSA, or our partners are deciding which spot checks to go out on for our re-enrolls and the encroachment discussion, how to identify those if we're not physically going to the field.
Well, if you think there's encroachment, you need to go to the field. That's where, again, that local decision of, you know, if it was re-enrolled in 2020, so it was 10 years old in 2020 and everything looked great, and you're very confident that trees wouldn't be encroaching or Canada thistle wouldn't have come in, you can forego the site visit. But if not, then agree to go make a site visit and double check it.
Great, thank you. That's all that's in the comments so far.
All right, good questions, good questions. All right, one more document that we'll cover here, and this is the non-compliance process. So again, there's a lot of nuances to what could be a possible non-compliance issue. So we try to lay them out, and there's a difference, of course. So kind of step through this, and again, this you won't hopefully be using this document for quite some time, and I'll have a little disclaimer coming up here. But anyway, we'll step through this. Okay, so number one, Indiana law with noxious weeds. Again, if we find in a maintenance status review, again, these are the contracts that are expiring in 2 years. If the noxious weeds are between 0 and 10%, so Canada thistle, Palmer amaranth, all the new species that were added to the state law are likely not going to be there in year 8 plus of a contract. Most of those are annual plants that won't thrive unless the planted vegetation we plant out there didn't take. Okay, but if we find Canada thistle, that's a big one. Johnson grass is going to be a big one. Shattercane. If it's between 0 and 10%, the contract can be considered in compliance. No problem. So we've given a little bit of leeway here. Okay. Yeah, the Indiana law says none. CRP contract says none, but we know what reality is. We're giving a little bit of leeway between 0 and 10%. However, FSA will send a letter to the producer requiring that those noxious weeds be treated prior to re-enrollment. Again, we're not going to call them out of compliance for 0 to 10%, but we will require those farmers to do some action on those noxious weeds. If it's greater than 10%, then that contract actually is out of compliance, because again, that's beyond our comfort level here in Indiana. We will have to take issue with that farmer, and again, work locally together, have that communication to the farmer, use the proper procedures to notify and get it fixed and all that good stuff. I'm not going to go into detail here, but if you're running that situation, follow this guidance. If you have questions, float that on up. But again, greater than 10% noxious weeds is going to be a true non-compliance issue. Okay. Hopefully we won't find many of those, but we have it there for you in case. Similar with establishment status reviews. Again, if we're in year 3 of the contract, we find that Canada thistle or something's coming in at 0 to 10%, we'll consider that in compliance, but we do need to make sure that farmer knows, hey, these things could get out of hand. Now's the time to get them under control before we look at it again prior to re-enrollment, because now we might find you out of compliance. So again, a good way to let farmers know, hey, now's the time to get on these things while they're young and not so dominant, and get them under control. But if we do in a newer establishment status review find that the greater than 10%, again, that's a non-compliance, and we'll have to take those steps accordingly. Questions on noxious weeds? Okay, let's move on. This one, I again, as we sent this out and we had some questions come in, great questions. We needed more conversations with the state office. Okay, we wanted to get this out to you as soon as we could, and this is what happens when we maybe rush and just rubber stamp things. But we're going to have a conversation about this. But I'm going to step through this real quick. These are the unapproved species. Okay, so again, noxious weeds, those are state law. Those are heavy hitters. The unapproved species are more of a USDA list of species. And again, admittedly, we may not have done a good job of communicating these to farmers until about 2020. And so we're going to find these. So here's kind of our step process that we've used in the past. Again, this is subject to change, so don't take any action on this right now. But if you need to action soon, get with us. We'll tell you the right way to go. But the way we've done it in the recent past, the past couple of years, if we have more than 10% unapproved species, so we can use the term, the woody encroachment. Okay, if we have more than 10% woody encroachment, and we have suitable species that are also present. So let's say we have a safe grass practice. We got 20% woody encroachment. We're going to say that contract is considered in compliance, but we'll have to inform that farmer that if they're going to re-enroll, they're going to take those trees, get them under control. If they're just going to re-enroll it as another safe. Okay. What we're struggling with is, if should we require the farmer to make those fixes before re-enrollment? Okay, so I'm just going to say that out loud. This is subject to change, but that's kind of the way we've gone in the past. We've kind of said, since we didn't tell the farmer adequately in the past, we're giving them an out. But come re-enrollment time, if they want to re-enroll, they're going to have to fix it up to current CRP requirements and standards. Bottom line. Now, however, if we have greater than 10%, but the suitable species are not present, so example, we had a CRP safe grass practice and it's totally trees. There's no native grasses or wildflowers out there. That's a non-compliance issue. We're going to move forward with that. Okay. Similar with establishing status reviews. Again, giving different latitudes for the varying levels of unapproved species, but also relating that to, are there also required species out there at the various densities and diversities, and kind of giving some leeway to the clients to get those fixed up. I'm going to keep moving here in the sake of time. We also have other weeds and other pests that are not on our unapproved species list, things like ragweed, goldenrod. We know these can become prominent in CRP acres. Kind of a similar approach. If there's a lot of goldenrod in a grass practice, but we still see the big blue stem, the coneflowers and all the other good stuff out there, that's not out of compliance. Okay. But we are going to tell the farmer, if you're going to re-enroll it, you're going to have to get that goldenrod under control because we need better diversity moving forward. However, if let's say it's 100% goldenrod, and there's no other suitable species present, then that would be a non-compliance issue. Okay, similar with establishments. I don't want to read to you because you can read it on your own leisure, but just kind of going through some things. Practice failures, we might see some of these, but now we need to decide, was that practice failure the result of weather or other events that the client didn't have control over, or was it due to lack of maintenance? So again, that's where we need practice failures. We do need to contact the client. Hey, we noticed that your practice is not working. Your waterway is eroding, or your CP9 is not holding water. We do need to notify the farmer that is a non-compliance issue. But then we need to hear from the farmer. Why is that? Was there excessive wetness, excessive drought, so on and so forth, that made that practice not function properly, beyond their control? And again, we follow the process depending on the decision that the farmer gives us. Reduction in CRP acres, crop creep, whatever you want to call it. If we had a 30-foot waterway or 30-foot waterway enrolled, but now it's 15 feet. There's no leeway for that. That's the farmer's responsibility. They've been getting paid on that extra 5 feet. We need to make sure we get that corrected and go through the process as possible. That is a definitely non-compliance issue if we see a reduction in CRP acres. Now, if it's due to stream bank erosion or other things, again, that's why we have a process. We need to find out from the farmer what's going on, and adjust accordingly. The other big one is erosion. Again, erosion on CRP is a no-no. There is no leeway for erosion. So again, if we document this, we need to make sure that we get communication with the farmer, get that erosion fixed up, and move forward accordingly as far as what happens with that erosion fix. And finally, we put this in here for the re-enrollments and that sort of thing. So again, just to help you navigate that part of that possible non-compliance where we may find it. So with that, are any questions on the non-compliance process? Or anything? I'm done covering the joint memo. So if there are any questions at all, let's hear them, please.
We do have a few conversations in the chat, Shannon, that I'll try to summarize, but The first one's a concern that if the participants need to have 0% Canadian thistle, better reconsider forbs in the mix. I'd like to say we could have pollinator plots and grass only plots, but only solution I see is 0 forbs. Even pollinator plots have some Canadian thistle. And then there was a follow-up to that. With that being said about accepting Canadian thistle, then could we change the check sheet to reflect that 0 to 10% is acceptable as the old sheet stated?
Well, let me answer that in two different ways. Number one on the check sheet, again, 0% is what's required. Okay. We're saying though, we are going to inform the farmer that 0% is required, but there's a big difference between calling someone out of compliance and informing them that, hey, you're on the verge, right? So 0 to 10%, we're saying, get it under control. That's your responsibility. Show us what you get under control. So again, that's, it may not be possible, but farmers need to make every effort possible, right? So we're not going to change the sheet because we can't, because policy is 0 really, but we give a little leeway behind the scenes before we actually use the hammer approach. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Back on the Canada thistle, and there's always going to be Canada thistle and what to do with it. Yeah, we understand that. We understand that, but I got to kind of come back to that old mentality of, we do also do a suitability and feasibility sheet for each of these re-enroll or each of these practices, right? If we as the technical authority decide that, hey, this site just will not accept a pollinator planting, we need to make that technical call, and we need to make sure we're all have one USDA voice on that call. But if we decide that pollinator planting just won't work here because of there's so much Canada thistle in the community or what have you, canary grass on a muck soil, we need to make that technical call and get FSA to agree to it and communicate that to the farmer and say, let's find you another practice that might work better for you. Otherwise, you're going to have a maintenance nightmare, and we don't want to find you out of compliance because of something you can't control or because of the site conditions. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and just to clarify that with FSA side with the difference between meeting specs and out of compliance, I think that previous document does a really good job, and I highly encourage all of our partners to sit down and review that kind of on a step-by-step basis with any issue or concern that we're seeing there. Because just to echo Shannon, just because they may not meet specs doesn't necessarily mean FSA's county committee needs to deem them out of compliance. That's what I like about that document. I like playing in the gray area, and sometimes it gets us in trouble, and that's why we need to do further review on it and kind of get an update to it. But we still need to make sure we're having those conversations of that threshold for our county committees to make an accurate determination of if they're in or out of compliance. There's another question in here, Shannon. Does a new LTP 13 form need to be filled out after issues are addressed by the landowner? Example, after the seeding is completed.
Good question, Tim. I'm going to see what I put in writing here. Where we go here? Yeah, so we say repeat step 3, which step 3 is go back out and make another site visit. So yeah, just to close the loop, complete another LTP 13 to show that it's good to go. So again, and then we realize this, when we find issues, we are invested in more visits, likely, right? We don't want to throw things under the rug, but that's where again we want to make sure we're all on the same page and make sure that this is an actual issue that we need to take action on, because it's going to take a lot more of everyone's time, the client's time, the technical agency's time, FSA's time, and our partners' time. So, but it's important. So that's where we need to make sure that we have those local communications and make sure we're on the same page, so we don't do work unnecessarily. But the work that we do is going to result in some good positive action. And I'll have to say, probably the best way to avoid issues in the future is back in the initial conservation planning stages and the initial contract approval stages, have those good conversations up front with the clients. Make sure they're invested in the maintenance, make sure they're invested in the management, make sure that, now we've given you the tools to communicate that in writing to the farmers. Make sure we take the time up front to have them take ownership of their CRP acres, and then likely the future will be much happier than the oversights we made in the past, I guess, of not giving this to our farmers in writing. And again, we know the farms change hands. Again, we need to have those conversations with the new owners as well. Good questions. Good questions.
And then to follow up on that, does the participant need to sign the updated LTP 13?
Yep.
To me, looking at step 3, they do need to be notified. And again, as we talked previously, on how that signature is obtained can be done at a local level, but the notification that they do have it up to specs and they have completed the corrected needs on an FSA standpoint is an important aspect there.
Yeah. Again, CRP is actually the farmers program, right? It's their land. They need to make sure that they are well informed of what we're doing as USDA, what we're requiring of them. So they definitely need to make sure we need that verification that they understand the good and the bad of what they're doing out there. Good. All right. We're going to move on. Josh, are you available to give a highlight of your GIS tool you put together?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. I'm going to turn it over to Josh Nierenberg, our new GIS specialist in Indiana. I sent a message out yesterday about a good GIS tool that he sent out. So, Josh, you want to give us a good rundown of what you've put together? We'd appreciate it.
Sounds great. Shannon sent out an email yesterday with some guidance for INNRCS employees on our web app that we've created. So I'll share my screen. So this is the email he sent out. If you go to this link, it'll pull up this web app. You can zoom in on each county. So I'll just zoom in down here in Gibson. And in this, if you zoomed out, it only shows the tracks. Once you zoom in far enough, it'll pull up the fields that are listed for reviews. And right now they're all red because they're all marked as not complete for the review. There's 2 ways you can change from not complete to completed or a field review is not needed. The web app here, you can click the edit button, and then you click on the field you want to edit. Then you can scroll down and change from not to complete, for example, and then it'll change it to blue. One thing I want to note is some fields have a field number listed like this. Other fields, I don't think this one has field numbers listed. This one does not have field numbers listed because it did not have a one-to-one match with the sheet that got sent out. I think there's some discrepancies on field numbers for some tracks. So basically, if a field number didn't get matched up from the sheet Shannon sent me, I just included all the fields on that tract. So maybe not every one of these practices needs reviewed. You'll have to look at possibly maps from FSA. I'm not sure. Might be a question for Shannon on how you review that. So the only other thing I was going to show was the field maps. So I think I can share my phone screen by doing this. Maybe. Is my phone screen showing up?
Not yet.
Okay. Let's try that again.
There it goes.
Awesome.
Here you go.
Okay, so if you open field maps, there's a map called Indiana CRP map 2023. This pulls up basically the same map that I just showed on the PC. It shows where you're at. It's got your dot. It'll follow you around when you're outside. There's 2 things that this might be useful for. If you just click on the tract, it'll pull it up, and you can click the little direction button in the bottom left. I know it's hard to see where I'm clicking, but in the bottom left, it'll pull up Apple Maps or Google's Maps. That'll let you navigate to that field. And then if you zoom in far enough, you can click this field 8, for example. This is the one I just changed a few minutes ago. And you can click the HEL, and you can click the bottom left edit button. You can see all the information if you scroll, and then if you want to edit the status of it, you click the pencil in the bottom left, and then you can change it from not complete to complete, or a field review isn't needed. So that's kind of all I had. I don't know if Shannon wanted me to show anything else or not.
That's perfect, Josh. Just wanted to make sure that everyone kind of saw the value of putting these data out there geographically. Again, if you're traveling up, I saw US 41 right there. If you're traveling up US 41 to go to an area meeting or somewhere, you can say, oh, hey, I might just take a little detour here and check this out and make your lives more efficient rather than driving by the same place every day. And they say, oh crap, I didn't know I was supposed to look at that. So again, you can kind of see geographically where these are located, be more efficient, plan out a work day or a work period. If you're going to check an equip or another site visit, you can stop by and pick up some of these on the way. Thank you, Josh. Really appreciate what you've done here, man.
No problem. If you guys have any questions or can't get access to something, just send me an email or send me a message on Teams.
Josh, there is a question. Can partners access these tools?
They should be able to. There's guidance in the email that Shannon sent. There's guidance in the email that Shannon sent down here on how to get access. Did this email go out to partners as well? I'm not sure.
It went out to all INNRCS employees. So I guess I'll have to caveat that, Josh, because it does require either a link pass login or eAuth, right?
Yes. Yeah, you have to be able to log in with a link pass to this GIS states portal, but there is a partners group, so I believe there's already quite a few partners that have access. If they can log into field maps with mobile link, if they can log into field apps with mobile link, they should have access on their phone. I just saw that question pop up.
So again, just so we're on the same page, these data are PII, right? I mean, geographic locations of farms and farm numbers, all that's PII. So we need to make sure that we keep it within our USDA firewall. So some of our partners may not be able to get access to these data. So just have to put that out there bluntly, I guess. Josh, are you seeing the chat?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if you don't. So I haven't been in this position long. If you don't have a federal phone or tablet, I'm not sure that you'd be able to access it. I'm not 100% sure. Yes, I can send the link for loading field maps on your phone. I'll put that in chat here in a second.
Cool. And just I'm gonna put Josh on the spot here. You know, we also got our Food Security Act compliance status review list, our track list. So we'll likely be putting those on a GIS tool as well. So that again, you can kind of see more of where this workload lies, and hopefully be more efficient as you travel and plan out your workday.
It was asked how to get it, how I got the track to change, or the field to change to blue. I just changed the review status from not reviewed to reviewed or completed. Completed, I think, makes it blue.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. Well, thank you, Josh. Thanks a bunch. Thanks, Jared. Thanks, everybody. Any last minute questions before we get you back to your day? All right. Greatly appreciate your time. Take a look at those documents. Come up with any questions, let us know. We'll work through them with you. And we look forward to seeing the great conservation work that you all get done this year. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good one.